Hey guys, we're doing another video about games, and this is gonna have a lot of crossover with Wellness Wednesday, but I wanted to keep it out of Wellness Wednesday because any of these discussions risk being toxic, and I want to keep that out of Wellness Wednesday. Of course, I say this now, and the people who get really, really mad at me will just take their shit into that content. Please don't do that. And this is the thing, the fact that I have to watch this is part of what inspired this video. And I'm going to use attachment theory language, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it. It's something that's commonly understood, which is why I'm using it. I do think, that sort of four-pronged model lacks nuance. Because you can have, an overall secure attachment, but have, one particular button that gets pushed that you're still not quite, done your work. And nobody is. The thing I don't like about all these types of theories is that, they make the language of secure attachment can be they can be used to manipulate people, and no matter what language was used, that's the case when something's like codified like this. But that's just a disclaimer, because most people have a basic understanding of attachment theory, and the reason I'm using it is because I've noticed that the language around games, I'd say it's parasocial, but that involves at least another person. Maybe the definition is creeped, but it very much is like people are forming these relationships to games, not people they meet in a game, the game itself. I mean, we're at the point where we're referring to turning a live service game off as killing it. That's speaking about it like it's alive. It's important to talk about, okay, let's talk about this here, not to judge, just let's do a bit of a check. Because if you're talking about owning something and you're demanding you own something that you are speaking about as if it is alive, while ownership can look a lot like possessiveness. And it is, some of the behavior I'm seeing in people, it really does fit. I get being disappointed when something you like isn't around anymore. I was super pissed when I bought, a Doctor Who box set and the DVDs were in so tight, the DVD for the last 3 episodes snapped and broke, and so it was unplayable. That was irritating. And can you get a refund for that? No, because you opened it and it was a 10-disc set. And yeah, fuck you. And is it annoying? Yeah. Did I melt down and act like going through the stages of grief? No. I'll find another way to watch it. What I actually ended up doing was buying the exact same DVD set on sale. So 9 out of the 10 discs I have duplicates of. Awesome. But this is the reality of our, world of relatively cheap consumer goods. For the amount of play hours we get in games now, they are fairly cheap. So we do have to watch expectations, and we have to watch our emotional regulation when it comes to this stuff. Because if you're getting like anxiously attached, or if you're using games to avoid real life relationships, a lot of the behaviors I'm seeing in some of these debates are consistent with the tells of those kind of insecure attachment styles. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video, and kind of what does this say? Because I want to be clear. I am not just talking about game players. I'm not just talking about the fan bases. I'm talking about some of the devs, not all, and a vast majority of the game's press. The kids are not all right in the game's press. Holy shit. So, you know, I do think that that's a big stumbling block when it comes to solving any problems, is the minute anything involves, you know, a disruption to these very complicated toys, somebody has like a trauma-like symptom, and suddenly you're no longer dealing with an adult. You're dealing emotionally with a 12 to 16-year-old with all the tantrums that come with it. So if you like this content, help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/LeannaK, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session. Somebody can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/LeannaK. Also like and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy this content. And yes, I am wearing my sparkly Canadian flag shirt. Okay, so for people who don't know, quick rundown on attachment theory. Secure attachment style is, you know, you're able to have empathy for people, but also set, you know, boundaries, appropriate boundaries, not too rigid, not too loose, right? You tend to feel relatively safe, stable, and satisfied in your close relationships. Now, obviously, if somebody radically changes on you, that is not the case. You are capable of feeling safe, stable, and, you know, satisfied in close relationships. You don't fear being on your own, but you also thrive in close, meaningful relationships. It took me a lot of work to get there. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It just means, you know, you appreciate your own self-worth. You find you like being with other people, but you're okay being apart. You seek support. You learn to meet your emotional needs, but you're also able to be there for others. You can emotionally regulate. You attempt to have healthy, honest conflict. You can't, you know, you can't control the other person, but you do your best. And you have resilience with disappointments, setbacks, you know, when a relationship ends, other parts of your life. That resilience is what you do not see in a lot of these discussions of games. And so that's secure. And then there are 3 subtypes of, you know, insecure attachment. There's anxious attachment or ambivalent attachment, or anxious preoccupied. There's a bunch of different names. There's avoidant dismissive attachment, also known as, oh, that doesn't have another name. Sorry, I'm confusing it with disorganized or disoriented attachment style. But so anxious attachment is, you know, when you say somebody is needy, that's what it refers to. They're anxious and uncertain in relationships. They lack self-esteem. They really crave emotional intimacy, but think people don't want to be with them. Obviously, that's not great. And, you know, in attachment theory, the idea is that it comes from early childhood. The thing is, you can work on it if you didn't have a great childhood. So that's the part I kind of go, yeah, okay, I see it, but a little reductive. But, you know, obviously people with anxious attachment really struggle with trust. And when they find someone or something they love, they become overly fixated. They become obsessed with it. And, you know, that's where the possessiveness comes in. And then the boundaries get violated. You can't take, hey, I need you to back off on this. Whenever there's a little bump, there's this panic, anger, or fear, something's going to be taken away from you, right? You need constant reassurance, a lot of attention. This sounds exactly like what some people want from game companies, right? And it obviously affects relationships. They tend to focus on romantic relationships and friendships, but that really matters in jobs too. If you can't handle your boss telling you to cut it out on something, you're not going to do terribly well at that company, right? Now, avoidant, dismissive, as opposed to anxious, or just avoidant, you hear avoidant attachment. They're the opposite. These are people who try to avoid emotional connection because they're afraid of, closeness. They're hyper individualized, hyper independent. They don't want to rely on other people. They don't want other people to rely on them. And this may sound great, right? Like this may sound super sigma male, but it is not how human beings are designed to work. And this is something that I work very hard to not slip into, because I've been fucked over so much. It would be so easy to just go, fuck people. But you can't get anything done that way, right? Not only do we need other people to achieve our goals and get the things we want out of life, we are hardwired for connection. Deep down, people do want meaningful relationships. They just have a deep-seated fear of intimacy if they're avoidant. And for those people, games become this replacement for real relationships with real people. If something doesn't go well in a game, you can just reload from last save. And you can find all these games where all these people just think you're amazing and, oh, everything's wonderful and what do you want, dear, and all that stuff. And, there's very few of these online, these video game romances where you can sort of have a fight and work stuff out and learn something about the other person. It's just approve, disapprove. There's a few mechanics that allow you to, recover from saying the wrong thing. Astarion and Baldur's Gate 3 is one. I mean, Fenris and Dragon Age 2 just fucks right off. Ironically, both of these characters are male victims of sexual abuse. It seems to be the one place you can do it. Isabella has a bit of that in Dragon Age 2 as well. After that, the romances in Dragon Age became shallow as saucepans. Other than Manfred, who is amazing, and Vilgard. The characters in Vilgard were actually quite good, as much as even former BioWare devs are bashing that game. Classy, not. So then there's, so you can see how games as a substitute for this stuff, people are going to get very attached to these characters. And, we focus on chatbots with this stuff, but I know people who use them, and at least the people I know, they jump around to different ones. They're kind of interested in programming them, and it's almost like practice communication, and I think that's actually kind of a good thing, because practicing getting better at communication is one of the things to do to get a more secure attachment style. It's not easy. I don't want to make this sound like it is. And then the final insecure form of attachment is disorganized or disoriented attachment style. Formerly known as fearful avoidant. Intense fear, often as a result of childhood trauma, neglect, or abuse. People with this attachment style tend to feel like they don't deserve love or closeness in a relationship. That's different from not trusting other people. It's, there's something wrong with me, I don't deserve it, right? And these are the people that tend to swing between the extremes, the splitting, the you're the best person ever, no, I hate you. There's a lot of that in gaming too, as you can see. And none of these are personality disorders or mental illness. That's the difference about this. That's why I decided to use this language. The other thing about people who are disorganized attachment, they can be incredibly insensitive, controlling, untrusting, have explosive behavior that are flurries of abuse. Gaming discourse in a nutshell, right? And that's the part that I find really baffling. That personally, I don't think that it's reasonable to feel like you're being taken. It's reasonable to want to be taken seriously when you are freaking out and, screaming racist and sexist epithets at somebody because your game got turned off and they don't completely agree about what to do with it. Your game got turned off. I repeat, your game got turned off and you're having an emotional response akin to someone breaking up with you or someone dying. Again, referring to it as killing games. And I am not saying that every person who uses that phrase is anthropomorphizing their games, but it is an emotionally manipulative moniker precisely because it attaches a consciousness that can feel pain to a video game getting turned off, when the consciousness that is feeling pain is the players. But we're anthropomorphizing this game instead of looking at what's going on here. Why are people forming such intense attachments to these games? A game is around for 10 years. It gets turned off. People lose their freaking minds. I'd say, well, that's a pretty good game, but that would be a bad joke because games should not be encouraging a dependency. And that's why that avoidant element is so important. That we haven't found any non-gambling mechanics that are addictive or inherently encouraging compulsion. Now, when you're playing with other people, there is this idea that this is what's put me off of guilds like MMOs, because I just don't have the reliable schedule to be able to block off 3 hours for something like World of Warcraft or Knights of the Old Republic. No, the Old Republic. Knights of the Old Republic is a single player. Blah, 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 blah. The Star Wars MMO. They're good games. I just am a shitty player because of time. And it makes me a bad guild member, and I accept that. And so, it is what it is. It's my lifestyle is not conducive to it. That's not the same as going, oh, I have to watch. I mean, God, Satisfactory, RimWorld, those games will suck me in. But not only is it one more turn syndrome, they're just so chill. The music is so chill. Everything about it is chill. And with me, that's not the game that's needing to relax. And I really do encourage everybody watching this that if your life is that stressful, if it is that miserable, there are things that you can do to make it better. I don't think it's the games per se. I think it's that we live in a very dehumanizing, depersonalized world of work and school now. And because we don't have the social gathering places, that we used to, God, even when it started eroding way before COVID. It used to be fairly inexpensive to kind of rent a party room and do a little thing. You could get a plated meal for $50 a person. Now it's $250 a person. So it's just not affordable the way it once was. Movies, I remember movies were, God, $2 Tuesdays. I remember those. But things have become more expensive. People are working longer hours, and people are discouraged from socializing at work because the workplace cultures are toxic. And like, where do you meet people? Right? It's just everything feels super cliquey. Even when you go to things on Meetup, these aren't experienced event planners, or just people that decided to do something. So it's the greater social world that's broken before you even get to the individual skills gaps. And I've seen some very specific repeated emotional skills gaps through some of the exchanges on the Discord server. And I call it a skills gap because I hate the term emotional intelligence. It's not. Intelligence is intelligence. It's the ability to rationalize emotions. Emotional regulation is a completely different set of skills. Yes, there are little tricks. You can talk better to yourself. You can be less brutal on yourself. But thoughts are thoughts, emotions are emotions. It's important to know the difference, because there are a lot of people out there just not feeling their feelings. And so they have this idea that they're being horribly misconstrued and lied about, and they're not factoring in that the emotional charge that they're bringing to the table is washing out any logical argument they could make. People are not going to get into a nuanced debate with somebody who seems like they're on their last hinge, if that. Hopefully that makes sense. And that's one of the things about improving your attachment style. Because again, this stuff goes back to childhood, and that's why I don't like people going, man babies and all that stuff. This is trauma. And this is neglect as a kid. And it's not just about being shy. It's about not feeling safe when you were a young person. And it doesn't require actively traumatic experience or physical neglect. It can be your one or both parents were depressed, and so they neglected you because they were having their own struggles. People think that parenting is just something everybody knows how to do, and it's not. So if you had somebody who just, wasn't a bad person but wasn't a great parent, that's where some of this stuff can come from. It's not a moral failing. It's not a fault. It's just a deficit in emotional skills that are important to recognize. And, so they can gradually improve. And self-management, the managing the big feelings and staying reasonable even when you are, frightened, panicked, angry, really sad, that takes work. Amygdala hijacks are real. They are worse when you lack self-awareness. If you can't name your feelings with a degree of specificity, if someone says, how are you feeling about that? And you go into a lengthy explanation about what happened, you're not answering the question. Two people can have the exact same set of circumstances happen to them, but one of them will find it kind of funny. The other person will be completely rattled, right? Everybody's different. And that emotional subjectivity is critical and can't be derived via a summary of what happened. The only person that knows deep down what you're feeling is you. But that doesn't mean that every person even knows themselves what they're feeling. And when you don't know what you're feeling, you will be sending messages that you're not aware of. And God, the number of people who do this lengthy preamble about how bad everything is for them, and this is so unfair, and they didn't do what people are claiming they're doing, and they didn't have the intentions that people claim they were having, but they're sorry. And they don't understand why that apology didn't land real well. They apologized. It was the 3 paragraphs before they got there, because they're sitting on so much distress that it's not resolved from the last thing that happens before it comes into the new thing. And then, the social awareness component, this is when the amount of autism in gaming becomes a real issue, because of this thing of, oh no, autistic people can't help it. I know a lot of autistic people, and some of them have worked very hard on their social awareness and, workarounds to social awareness. And other people just haven't had the opportunity, didn't bother, and you see the difference. So, an autistic person isn't a complete emotional or social cripple. Everybody's different. But, being comfortable in groups, not all groups. I mean, nobody's comfortable in a room completely full of strangers. But you can be more comfortable if you feel like you have the right to be there and you're going, okay, I'm going to be present. I'm going to be situational aware. I'm going to be emotionally and socially aware. And that's all I can do. But I'm not going to stress myself to the point of anxiety over it. I'm just going to be chill. And the things people go to war over in gaming have no chill. And I really do believe that more would get done, more would get solved, and we'd end up with better results with this stuff if things didn't just go bafflingly unhinged over really relatively small disagreements about things. One person gets upset, so somebody else gets upset, and because there's, no separation between, okay, I can understand why you're upset about this. The name calling was uncalled for. Instead of, he called me a name? Well, I get to call him a name now. And, oh, you called me a name? Well, I'm going to call you even worse names. And it's just a race to the bottom. Like, there's no emotional maturity in those fights. And welcome to the top Twitch streamers by earnings out there. It's all fucking drama. They're all just warring with each other. They're all varying degrees of sex pest and into weird shit. Like, I shouldn't say all, but there's a lot of it going on at that echelon. Like, what the hell? And people start threatening each other's families. There's a lot of going after families now. That ain't cool. And that's the last bit, right? The relationship management, right? Resolving conflict in healthy, constructive ways that actually strengthen the social bonds instead of tearing them all apart. The games press is fucking terrible at this. Fucking terrible. I used to be one. One of the major newspaper articles I got published was the National Post of all places, because that's a pretty conservative bent, but actual newspaper about games and empathy. And the potential of games can foster empathy. BioWare wouldn't give me an interview for that one. They wanted me to submit 2 written questions or 5 written questions, no follow-ups, which for a newspaper, no, you need to do proper journalism for it to get in the actual, art section. So Ubisoft did it, and they were great. They gave me access like 20 minutes with a Black Flag Freedom Cry dev, and it was completely freewheeling. I could ask whatever I wanted. That's how it's done. But so, I have some pedigree on this point, and persuasive writing is not done in games journalism because the articles that get the most clicks, for one, are inflammatory. But also, I don't think that the people writing this stuff are interested in true depth of thought. They have their personal and political hobby horses, and that's all they want to push, because that's the only reason to go into games journalism nowadays. The money's shit, and you don't even get good games anymore to get paid in, because, places like Bethesda don't give out review copies anymore. And you're so low down on the totem pole at that point, you don't get those games. You have to play the shit ones that nobody cares about, nobody reads, and then they get, oh, well, your traffic isn't like somebody else's. Well, no shit, because you won't let me write about anything anybody cares about, and then it's all SEO, right? So you get these articles that have nothing to do about the search engine terms. It's just, oh, let's graft on this thing I want to write about, throw in Superman and a few other things, and there we go. SEO, green on the bot, let's publish. And I do think that the lack of emotional competence, notice I said competence instead of maturity, in the games press did contribute mightily to this, because games companies have PR people until old BioWare devs come off their NDAs. My God. I keep pounding that because it's not even never meet your heroes anymore. It's don't read the online interviews of your heroes, because it's just, bitter. Yeah, I digress. It's there's a serious structural issue with games journalism, and I think that really what they should do is give people who do game guides their own personal, and you don't even need this anymore, because that's what your Facebook is for, that's what Substack is for. If you want to just do your personal musings, right, do it there. I've actually been thinking about taking out a Medium or a Substack to do things in text, because I get tired of talking sometimes. But there is a real not setting an example in games writing. And I can't go hard on players who aren't being compensated in some way for their opinions when the level of discourse in the so-called professionals is so bad. And I mean, the in-depth dev interviews are being done on streams and podcasts and everything right now. It's not even in the written articles, which is really too bad. It really is. And then, of course, a few particularly politically astute types jump to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and all that stuff. So they're doing well for now. But everybody else, there's no industry left. And so that's just left with YouTube and social media, and that's a massive trash fire on a plastic island in the ocean. It's just a goddamn tire fire that's been burning since, Gertzman Gate, retake Mass Effect, all the way through, blah, blah. Gamergate, woke, and here we are. And it's not working. There are things that we could do better. There's zero will to do it right now instead of outside of pockets like people I talk to, which is why I'm doing useful content, like positive content, like men liking stuff, and cordoning off stuff that's potentially toxic. So if people want to avoid the trash fire that will likely be the comment section here, they can. But it really is like there's this avoidant displacing type of gamer, and they're the ones that just are like obsessed with anonymity and want their online life, their gaming life, and their life totally separate. And that means that their life is usually has gone or is going to shit because they're not putting any work into it. They're just, I'm avoiding it whenever I can. And then there's, what I call the anxious possessive gamer, that is intent on ownership. You can never turn it off. I have to be able to have this game forever so it can never leave me ever. Don't leave me. Why does everyone leave me? Right. That's what it sounds like. Sorry, guys. It's a big... Why does everything I love die? It's a game. It didn't die. It got turned off. And if you're just one of those people who use just a metaphor and you didn't mean it literally, I'm not talking about you, right? I'm talking about people who are getting as upset as people do when, they lose a very close loved one. In some cases, more upset. And the problem with that stuff, every time one of these things kicks off, I hear, why don't they listen? Why don't they take us seriously? It's because you're not emotionally regulated. And that has been the case from the beginning. And then people say, well, they're not either. The games press isn't either. Right. Yeah, you understand. I worked with them. Can confirm. The only way this improves is if somebody... we start getting a critical mass of people going, yeah, I really like that franchise. I'm going to miss it. I really miss old school Gears of War. I'm going to miss that. I miss Halo, circa Halo 1 and 2. I miss real, my OG Baldur's Gate. I miss, Dragon Age Origins, which, holy crap, apparently EA shot down a remake. Just remaster that game. Don't remake it. Change nothing. Just improve the graphics. People will buy it. That's a license to print money, and they won't go for it. Meanwhile, Final Fantasy split Final Fantasy, Square Enix split Final Fantasy 7 into 3 goddamn games. They like money. There you go. But I miss those franchises. I miss Planescape Torment. Some took me 13 years to get Alan Wake 2. Do I miss them? Yeah. Am I going to war? Over it? No, because I still have the freaking Dragon Age comics sitting on my shelf. I can pick those up and remember anytime I want, and I'm super into Death Stranding too. And that's the thing. If you form new relationships on an ongoing basis that are meaningful and fulfilling, the ones you lose are not as dire, just like with people. And that doesn't mean you completely toss aside your friends every so often. It just means that the vast majority of people you meet are not lifers. They're not ride or dies. I'm fortunate enough to have, I consider more than my share, because, I got 4 or 5 right now, and I consider myself lucky if I got 1 or 2. And these are relationships that there's disagreement, there's negotiation, there's, working it out. There's respect for everybody's boundaries. And we like having each other around. I assume they like having me around. But we don't freak out when somebody gets quiet for a bit. Life happens. It's one thing to go, hey, are you okay? You've been quiet. It's another thing, oh, you're ignoring me. You're this, that, It is possible to have significantly more chill than we collectively have. But I really believe that, in the case of the games press, no, the problem is the games press. Those reporters are treated like garbage all the way down. They're treated like shit from the publicists. They're treated like shit from the marketing companies. They're treated like shit from the outlets they work on, paid like crap, and told to write drivel. And yeah, you gotta write crap sometimes just to get the word count. But it can be better managed. It should be like, look, if you do your work for the week, if you do your quota of guides and articles and all that stuff, then write about what you're passionate about. We'll put it out, and we'll put it out just because you're passionate about it, not looking for clicks. There can be a balance, right? And hey, one will pop every so often, right? But yeah, the gaming industry really needs to get more secure attachment across the board. And powers that be, even before we get into the collective shouts of the world, that holy shit, feminist frequency called, they want their fucking shtick back. My God. Even before we get to those people who just shamelessly pound stereotypes about gamers, there's, this online vitriol that, real talk, the game companies know, especially the AAA game companies know, do not reflect the opinions of the average player. Apparently, Assassin's Creed Shadows just cracked 5 million concurrent players recently, while the internet is pronouncing what a horrible failure it was. The internet's not life. So, personally, I found that the first thing I had to start working on was boundaries and communication style. It really came down to let other people worry about them. I'm going to worry about me. If someone calls me names, I don't have to respond in kind. If someone is being passive aggressive, I don't need to play that game. I will have the tough conversations. I will say things that people may not want to hear because I'm concerned about them, and that blows up in my face sometimes. And I'm prepared to accept that. I've had to have some tough conversations with people lately, but in some cases it was because there were kids involved in the mix, and when that's the case, you don't fuck around. And these things are just basic, I think. And if other people don't agree, that's cool, but you don't get in my space. Because, man, am I a lot happier, and do I have greater faith in people than when I was a games writer. Now, games journalism was better than TV. That's not saying much, but still. The money was better in TV. But yeah, it doesn't have to be this way. But it is going to be this way as long as the press keeps dehumanizing the core, the core consumers of their content. But also, people gotta realize that those evil games journos, they're just messed up people with insecure attachment, and quite frankly, a lot of them are just flat out insecure as is. way out over their skis, waiting to be found out as imposters. They're not evil. They're frightened. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron. Patreon.com/Leanna K if you like this content. Or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can use it but can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe to this channel if you want to help me out without spending any money. Thanks for watching.